everyone. Good afternoon and a happy snow day. So welcome to the Modern Midwest Mobility webinar series, which is also known as MCube or M3, hosted by the University of Kansas Transportation Center. So I am Nikila, or I also go by Nikki, and I'll be today's webinar moderator. So before we start with today's webinar on Kansas vision on the future of transportation, I would like to mention a few things. So meanwhile, before we get started, please feel free to post your names and your company name in the chat box to see if your friends are here. And again, thank you so much for being here and for your time today. So, and then if you have any questions during or after the presentation, please feel free to use the chat box or Q&A feature that can be seen on your screen. And for some reason, if you're disconnected, especially today's a snow day, which has been happening, please try logging in again or email me. And anyways, the webinar is being recorded. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel soon. And lastly, next month, we are having a webinar on something exciting related to electric vehicles. So stay tuned and you will be receiving some emails from KUTC soon. So coming to today's webinar, it is presented by our speakers, Mike Floberg from KDOT and Kip Strauss from HNTB. Due to some technical and the snow reasons, we do not have Mike on the call yet, but he might join us if possible. So before we start the presentation, I would like to give a little bit information about Mike and Kip. So Mike is the current Director of Innovative Technologies at Kansas Department of Transportation in the Division of Innovative Technologies. Mike graduated with a bachelor's in civil engineering from Kansas State University in 1988. He has worked for the KDOT since 33 and more years. Mike has moved around the agency, making stops in bridge design, bridge inspection, intelligent transportation systems, metro engineer, bureau chief, and in October 2017, he accepted the position of Director of Innovative Technologies to help the state of Kansas prepare for the future of transportation. So thank you, Mike, if you are seeing this video later. And a little bit about Kip Strauss is he's the current Associate Vice President and Manager of the Transportation Planning Department at HNTB's Kansas City Metro Office. He has 29 years experience working on and managing transportation planning and traffic engineering projects, including multimodal transportation studies, highway and arterial corridor studies, environmental studies, traffic impact evaluations, travel demand modeling studies, toll traffic and revenue studies, and transportation master plans. Mr. Strauss is a leader in planning for emerging technology solutions for clients. He's a graduate of the University of Kansas, Georgia Institute of Technology, and Rockhurst University. He's currently serving in Overland Park as the planning commissioner. And welcome back, J-Hop, Kip. Thank you for your time. And so I welcome Kip and Mike. We are so happy to have you here. And now the floor is yours.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to be here and talk to you about Kansas's vision on the future of transportation. So again, apologies for Mike Floberg with the snow day. He's at home and he lives outside of the Topeka area. So he says he has poor internet at home. So he was having some difficulties, but I've been working with Mike since 2019 on different aspects of connected and autonomous vehicles in Kansas. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today is working with Mike and KDOT on what the Kansas vision is. We looked at implementation. Oh, it's got a mind of its own. Looking at some pilot projects around the state. And then we submitted what's called an ATC MTD, basically a technology grant for CAV. And then in the current legislation going on right now up in Topeka, some autonomous vehicle legislation is being developed, and we've been helping them with understanding that. So what is the Kansas vision? And so what we did was, it was important to develop a vision up front The intent was to assure Kansas maintained steady momentum towards a common connected and autonomous vehicle vision. The goal was to make sure that public and private, make sure that public and private CAV planning, development, and implementation efforts were being supported and important to the statewide safety, equity, and economic vitality goals that were developed. So you can see here, early on, we wanted to set the framework for KDOT on what the mission, vision, and goals would be as they develop CAV in the state. So this was developed back in 2019. So from that, development of our integrated vision plan was built on three key principles: earlier, broader input, earlier, broader action, and multiple complementary initiatives. These principles we felt would future-proof our CAV decisions today against unpredictable future social and technological events or deployments. So here was the schedule that we developed for that first vision plan. Over the course of a year, we held a number of meetings with a task force that I'll talk more about here in a minute. But here at a glance are the key methods and timelines we used to develop that vision. Throughout the process, we used research, surveys, interviews, and interactive working sessions involving the task force, which included national subject matter experts and others. Combined, they gave us a high-level strategic framework for producing an integrated, comprehensive approach to CAV planning and deployment along key public and private sector players. So the next thing that we looked at was KDOT turned to an existing statewide connected and autonomous vehicle task force that they had developed in 2018. This group had previously met to support KDOT's new and emerging technology efforts. To better support our goals, this group was refined and expanded to ensure inclusion of major state agencies, as well as key public and private stakeholder groups likely to be affected by early and widespread CAV implementation. So here are the task force members. The task force reflects an important reality about the evolution and deployment of connected and autonomous vehicles. Successfully identifying, designing, and deploying new CAV-related technologies can require significant transformation for nearly every state agency and their clients and customers. So these technologies will require new policies and regulations as the private sector adopts and adapts to CAVs and their impacts. So what's important in this vision is KDOT realized early on that this was not an initiative for just KDOT. Connected and autonomous vehicles would affect all state agencies. Department of Commerce, Department of Insurance, Department of Agriculture are some examples. So they wanted to really kind of bring in many state agencies into this discussion. We did ask them early on what they thought about AV-CV technology and how it'll affect their organization and their strategic plan. So we used a number of different tools to work with the task force to help identify their needs from a planning process. We first electronically surveyed them about their level of knowledge regarding CAV technology, the expected timeline for its impact, and the effects of CAV on their own agency goals, the role their organization expected to play in the evolution of CAVs in Kansas, and what they were doing to address potential impacts on them and the state of Kansas. So we found that virtually every state agency throughout the CAVs CAVs would affect their mission and their strategic goals. and that they were already thinking about ways to respond to CAVs. So then we deepened the base understanding by conducting individual face-to-face interviews with them. And we aim to further refine our understanding of what Kansas CAV needs must be addressed for successful CAV deployments within the state. So here was a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that we did early on. We did this with the task force members, industry experts, and KDOT staff to collaborate in a far-reaching SWOT analysis to help shape the CAV vision plan. The multi-week dialogue around the SWOT analysis helped us to filter out elements common to all governmental initiatives generally, and transportation efforts specifically. This meant including general concerns about funding, public acceptance, and other important inherent policy initiatives. So the ongoing dialogue I referred to primarily took place in and around half-day task force workshops. Each session involved a balance of knowledge building and practical collaborative work on developing the state's vision and action plans. During the workshop, KDOT would cover survey results, case studies from other states, legislative requirements, and potential Kansas projects. KDOT also would have presentations on CAV projects ongoing in the US and heard about innovations coming from industry representatives. What was really exciting about the vision were the blueprints that we developed. So all of the effort of this at this point was intended to provide fuel for the thought for each of the participating state agencies. Now came the time for each agency to begin their own planning, starting with a simple 2-page blueprint outline provided to them. This gave them a framework to start from as they produced a high-level plan for incorporating connected and autonomous vehicles into their organizational business planning. The result would be an actionable, measurable plan that would help their leadership buy in and empower them to be thinking about CAV planning and deployment within their own mission and customer needs. So this is an example of one of the blueprints. Like I said, we did this for each state agency. This is the Department of Agriculture, and I know it's a little hard to read, but it provides a rigorous way for the department to think about how and when CAVs may affect their department. It also helps them define challenges, needed investments, and potential partners in advance, better protecting them from sudden industry or technological changes. And all of these I'll show you are on KDOT's website, so you could go in and look at all of these different blueprints. So from a state perspective, the blueprints deliver more than just agency-specific benefits. The blueprints are with their preset focus areas or topics, make it easy to confirm that the agencies are well aligned with their state CAV mission, vision, and goals. They also help facilitate collaboration between agencies by making it clear how they and the state can benefit from CAV initiatives. And by laying out specific goals and actions, it makes it easier to monitor, measure, and report on state progress. So in the vision plan, we laid out a number of different opportunities, at a high level that the state could be thinking about. And so we laid them out in relation to data initiation, agency or organization initiatives, partnership initiatives, policy and legislation, as well as public education. So back in 2019, these were some projects that KDOT was working on at the time. They're working on laying more fiber, looking at queue backup warnings on K10, an autonomous vehicle shuttle in Topeka. So you can see that there's a lot of different initiatives that were going on. Some of those came to fruition and some of them did not. And then new initiatives have come up, but I just wanted to give you a snapshot there. So then finally, creating that statewide CAV vision. The vision plan developed a strong foundation for identifying potential pilot projects. It empowers state agencies to develop CAV solutions from a forward flexible perspective. And by that, we mean that short-term decisions by individual agencies point towards a common longer-term operational CAV vision. And then the plan provides an opportunity to develop coordinated statewide policies and investments in a pragmatic, incremental fashion, concentrating first on those users and uses that are most pressing. So again, this vision is on KDOT's website under planning projects, and you'll see all the individual blueprints as an appendix at that point. After we worked on the vision plan, we moved to a new task order that was more focused on implementation. And so in this task order, we wanted to focus on what would be some pilot projects that we could identify that KDOT could start thinking about related to CAV. So in the implementation phase, the focus shifted to identifying 3 potential pilot projects that KDOT, KTA, and other partners could pursue. The intent was to build continuity with previous CAV work, make sure pilots occur in a mix of rural and urban environments, focus on pilots and produce more immediate results and benefits, develop implementation that builds CAV capacities across multiple agencies and that can be expanded easily, and then proceed with pilots within the current regulatory environment to save time and money, and identify innovations that were both specifically tailored to Kansas needs and unique enough to attract partner and media attention to what Kansas was achieving. So here's the timeline for the implementation phase. The pilot projects were developed through a year-long process driven by an advisory group made up of also state agencies, the Kansas CAV Task Force, educational institutions. I remember we had KU and K-State involved, and then national subject matters. The group provided a broad perspective on what pilot projects would better deliver value to the state of Kansas. And then so their insights were gathered and tested. The implementation phase started with more than 100 potential pilot projects being developed, or nearly 100, I guess I should say. Potential pilot projects then were refined and screened down based on their alignment with the statewide CAV vision, suitability to Kansas's needs, the potential type and magnitude of benefits, and the uniqueness in the national CAV marketplace. So let's look at our first pilot project that resulted from this process. We called it the Rural Work Zone concept. It involves a rural work zone safety location. It's intended to use technology to update motorists about lane closures, lane shifts, speed reduction, and narrow lanes. Data would be transmitted to customers and to KDOT and or KTA, creating a real-time understanding of events and conditions in the work zone. As part of this pilot, policies and procedures would be established to implement new technologies to enhance support for these applications. The second pilot project was called the Urban Vehicle to Infrastructure Pilot Concept, where we would create an urban corridor infrastructure project with connected technologies. Here, data would be transmitted to customers and KDOT related to speed restrictions and real-time traffic and safety-related concerns. This will enable KDOT to better manage traffic operations. The KTA could implement this similar project as a partner with local communities along the turnpike. And then new data collection and analysis will improve system operations. For example, traffic signal timings could be modified in collaboration with local entities that operate those signals to better manage congestion and improve transportation network efficiency. And then finally, the vehicle data to improve productivity. This was our third pilot project. We also called it commercial and agriculture vehicle information to improve productivity. The pilot would develop an urban or rural freight technology project that focused on improving safety, operations, and mobility. Located on a priority freight corridor to be determined and shaped by implementation partnerships to be secured. Using connected vehicle safety applications, its goal will be to deliver significant safety and economic benefits. So if you remember, part of the vision goals that I mentioned earlier were to identify projects of need, but then also that were uniquely identifiable to the state of Kansas. So you'll see as we move to a grant application, a freight corridor and an agriculture state moving agricultural products ended up being the grant that we submitted. So this got submitted. This ATC MTD is basically, a technology grant to improve technology. And so we called it the Great Plains Rural Freight Technology Corridor Project. And so essentially we're looking at how do we improve mobility and safety for our agriculture products that Kansas is, so well positioned for and produces a lot of. So we focused this technology solution out in Western Kansas. The total project cost is $14.5 million. We're requesting a little over $6.5 million. Let's see. The technologies proposed to be deployed. You can see advanced traveler information systems, advanced transportation management technologies, infrastructure maintenance, monitoring, and condition assessment, transportation performance data collection, analysis, and dissemination systems, and advanced safety systems. Most of this is geared towards providing this information to truckers, but personal vehicle motorists can obtain this information also. So you'll recognize that graphic from our implementation phase. So we brought this into the grant application. And so this technology corridor will improve safety and economic productivity on US 83, a 2-lane highway that was identified as a Kansas critical rural freight corridor. So it installs 100 miles of fiber optic cable, advanced technologies to deliver the traffic, weather, and other operational information to commercial trucking to optimize freight routing. Benefits also include safety and congestion relief for highway users, improved economic opportunities for low-income communities of color. So where is US 83? Way out in Western Kansas. So here's where it's identified. And so it runs from, just a little bit north of I-70, straight south, and eventually heads into Dodge City. So you can see that we had pulled out some information saying Kansas has the 7th largest state agricultural economy in the US. Much of that comes from a 5-county region anchored by US 83, a north-south 2-lane Western Kansas highway. And that's why, a lot of the reason why it's been identified as a rural freight corridor, important for freight productivity, but very rural in nature. I won't go through this, but these are some of the elements that I talked to you about before on the elements of the project, and then the purpose and benefit we had to list over on the right side. So these are just some statistics that we showed in the application. The value of agribusiness in this study area, the value of agricultural products, the agricultural as a percentage of Kansas's GDP, and so on. So we wanted to kind of talk about the significance of this corridor in our application. There's a lot of emphasis in the new administration on transportation equity and addressing transportation for underserved communities. And so we also showed communities that have high poverty levels and Hispanic and Latino populations. So then that was the third element that we've been looking at. And this final one is legislative briefing that we've been providing to the current legislation. So back in the fall, Walmart went to the governor and said that they were interested in developing some autonomous, what they called a mid-mile autonomous truck. They've been running this truck already in Arkansas, and they wanted to start running it in other neighboring states. So they are producing their own state legislation. They wanted to explore, using a fully autonomous operation for mid-mile services. They're teaming up with this company called KDOT, so you can search them on the internet and see about their self-driving vehicles. But the KDOT asked us to help them look at what was some other legislation going on around the country, and can we help them provide comments on Walmart's bill. So here's a map of current legislation related to connected and autonomous vehicles. And you can see Kansas, they're kind of in the middle, offset to the left a little bit, and how it's gray. And we currently don't have any legislation. And so many of the states around the country do have either executive orders or legislation addressing. And I saw this map 3 years ago, and there was less color in it. So we're certainly, as we're hearing more and testing more vehicles, we're seeing more legislation at the state level. So our feedback to KDOT on some draft legislation was, utilize standard definitions from that KDOT already has on the, as state laws, and take advantage of those. Keep CAV at the state level. We did not think it was a good idea for each local community to kind of be writing their own legislation and developing their own rules. We thought that should be left at a state level. Enable legislation for testing and pilot deployments. If they want to run this middle mile truck, identify some corridors where they can do some testing first before they roll it out statewide. Develop a statewide CAV program and assign the DOT to administer. So right now, Mike has been doing a lot of initiatives, but I wouldn't say that he's developed kind of a comprehensive program yet. He's thinking in that direction and has plans to do that. But right now, I think KDOT's been kind of putting their toe in the water and looking at a few different things. Utilize existing state laws and think long-term. And then some programmatic considerations we recommended were emphasize public engagement and awareness activities. Certainly, as these new bills are being rolled out and people are seeing autonomous vehicles or connected vehicles out there, we should be educating the public along the way. Formulate programs to enhance workforce development. I know that labor unions, there's a lot of concern about what does this mean from a labor standpoint. So we need to develop programs to work with workforce and identify a CAV champion of authority. So, who is going to be that champion of a CAV program and rolling out new initiatives is kind of what we talked about. But I think that's my last slide. So not sure how I did on time, but we can open it up for questions now.
Thank you, Kat. That was really great. So we do have one question. So for truck routing efficiency, are efforts being made to ensure compatibility of data across the state lines?
So there are national, yes, the US DOT is working on national standards for CAV to make sure that there is, a common language for vehicles. So definitely there's going to be interoperability between CAV infrastructure across the country.
Any more questions? I think you did great on the time. We have a lot of time, so that is so good. So we have one more question. So can you elaborate on the priority 2 on I-35 and 67, like the schedule? What, if any, local agreements, including car companies, are needed?
So that pilot project, yes, the idea was to collaborate with the car companies there. So when people are testing cars, that they can test out some of these new technologies and give feedback, not only to the car companies and the dealerships, but also the state. So those were 3 ideas that gathered a lot of input and support, but they took that 3rd one about the rural freight focus, and that's what they submitted on the grant. I will say that they're supposed to hear in April on that grant, and so assuming they win the grant, then they would move forward in implementing that CAV project out in Western Kansas. The other 2, I think it's a wait and see. I think they'd like to focus on one of those pilot projects and kind of gather data from it to make decisions on other pilot projects. And then after we had worked on those 3 pilot projects, the Walmart came to the state and said, we'd like to do this middle mile autonomous truck. So there's another pilot project that, from the private sector that's come up that I think KDOT would be very interested in participating in and gathering data also. So it's not necessarily that those other 2 would get implemented, but we wanted to generate some ideas. So as they gather funding, they could implement, but I think they'll focus on that rural freight one. And then I bet the middle mile truck, I bet would be the 2 that they'll focus on for now.
Yeah, I think he says, I understand there was or may still be a device on one of the intersections on 67th now. Okay, so we have next question. Do we have legislators interested in supporting CAV projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a good chance that that the legislation will pass. There's still time and they're debating the bill. What I've heard is one of the biggest concerns is, the labor unions have been pushing back about taking people out of trucks and, what happens to their jobs. But I think we need to educate the legislators and the labor unions that, we might need to train people for different kinds of jobs, that, we're certainly in a transformational time period where there's going to be new job opportunities with new technologies. And, so we do have a labor shortage of truck drivers right now. That's one of many implications on our supply chain issues. But, taking a person out of a truck will not happen, immediately. We'll take them out of the driver's seat in this autonomous truck, but they do plan on having a safety driver in the on the passenger side for the short term. Eventually they would come out. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of support in Kansas, and they just want to make sure that it's safe. And so I think a pilot project would probably come out of this as a first step.
Right. And our next question is, what can local governments do to be proactive related to CAV and connected vehicles? Will there be any funding available to assist communities with improving infrastructure?
I'd say look for opportunities to partner with the state. I know the city of Lenexa has an infrastructure, CAV infrastructure project with I think smart pavement, where in the pavement they're embedding the technologies to communicate with vehicles. And so I thought that was a great example of the city of Lenexa partnering with the state on and then there was a grant that the state offered. And I know that if Mike were on, he would talk about how they do have a technology grant program. So I don't want to misspeak and say how much it is each year, but communities can apply for grants, through the state, and every year he's got a pot of money to for local communities.
And we have the next question. Are the car companies trying to make their technology compatible with one another?
Yeah, I think, and because I'm more on the planning side than the technology side, I can only give you a pretty broad general answer, but the answer is yes. The US DOT is like writing the architecture to make sure that the car companies and their technologies can talk to the infrastructure that is going to be built. So pretty broad answer, but yes, everyone understands that, we don't want different systems, and, we don't want, we don't want to end up with a beta like we had in what was that, in the 80s, the VHS versus a beta.
Sure, yes. And our next question is, at full implementation of CAV technology, what level of roadways would not be included?
Well, I think when you answer that question, you have to think, well, what time frame are you talking about? So, my answer is going to be that for the most part, DOTs are going to look at, the interstate system, the US highway system, the state highway system first, what's on the national highway system. And then local communities would look to their arterials, just identifying the most important highest functional classes in the short term. But then in the longer term, I don't see why, every roadway wouldn't have some smart technology in it at some point down the road.
I'm assuming it's a comment, I guess, or a line. So RSU is still in place, but not broadcasting the single phase and timing information so far as Randy knows. Yeah. Do we have any more questions?
I guess Mike never joined. I was hoping he would maybe get on towards the end and be able to answer some questions from a state's perspective, but I'm not hearing him jump in.
Oh, let's see. Oh, okay. So Randy was actually responding to Ray Webb's question about the 67th Street. Sorry. It was
That one, also, we picked that location because of the car dealerships, but then Operation Greenlight runs right through there also with Shawnee Mission Parkway was another reason to identify, some technology enhancements along an Operation Greenlight corridor.
Okay. And we have one more question. Do you know any cities that is integrating the CAV into transit?
Oh, yeah. I mean, already, bus rapid transit corridors in Kansas City already have technology enhancements in them to understand what's going on around the bus and around the stations. And so there's already connected vehicle technology in transit in Kansas City, but that's a very important area that the industry is looking at and will expand upon. So just like freight and personal vehicles, transit will be very important for this technology. And from what I've heard, the IIJA bill, has increased the transit investment a lot over the next 5 years. So I would see, those are some areas that transit, if you think about, is more confined space, a protected space sometimes. So I think those are the kind of areas where people are going to feel safer about testing some of these new technologies.
Any more question, any more discussion that you guys want to do?
The main thing is, these technologies are there for safety. I think that's the number one priority is improving safety. And then the other takeaway is, we don't want to just put technology in for technology's sake. We want to have a purpose and, identify what is the need and address that need. So those are kind of two important takeaways.
Okay. So any more question? Any more discussion? Anything curious questions? So is there any plan to incorporate these with all mobility options?
Plans to include technologies with automobile? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Anjali, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but could you please elaborate on your question, please? I think she's asking about CAV plan in incorporating with all the mobility options.
Oh, all mobility options, yes. Like flexible fleets and TNCs, and yes, I mean, every mode of transportation is looking at, how to improve mobility. I mean, you see the, what is it? Domino's has an autonomous delivery vehicle, and Walmart, and I mentioned, and I mean, if you think about it, every mode of transportation is going through this technology, transformation. So, I mean, we've seen tremendous improvements with all modes. Now, in other states, we haven't focused it as much on Kansas, but I've done work in Florida too. And they use an acronym called ACES, and that's ACES, and they're focused on autonomous, connected, electric, and shared use vehicles. So they're also very focused on the electric and shared use, mobility aspects. And so I think I've seen that with a number of states, that they broaden it a little bit more to other mobility options too. And I could see Kansas doing that moving forward.
Yeah, and Jolie says, it seems that across Kansas, there is not a solid network or mobility management plan across the state yet.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And then, yes, and Raymond also shares he was in Tempe in November and had to wait for the Domino's autonomous delivery vehicle in a crosswalk. And then Bobby here has shared it seems like a pretty good article on New Flyer launches North America's first level 4 autonomous transit bus. So that's
well, I mean, they're already talking about personal vehicle drones. I mean, it's just such an exciting time in transportation. It seems like there's always some new idea and technology. I mean, in some ways, this is going very fast, but then I think in some ways, it can go slow when you start thinking about it on a day-to-day basis. But in other ways, we're making faster strides in transportation, like in the last 10 years, than it seems like we made in the previous 70 or something. So it depends on your perspective, but it's certainly an exciting time for young people that are getting into the field of transportation and all the opportunities. And with the IIJA bill, there's a lot of resources to put into transportation solutions. So pretty exciting for young people that are just graduating right now.
Sure, it is definitely exciting. So we do have one more question. So did the study touch at all on alternate sources of revenue, such as VMT?
So yes, it did. Very high level. But out of that came, KDOT is doing a VMT study right now. HNTB is not working on that, but we're working on or also called a road user charge. We're working on one in Oklahoma and other states around the country. I think many states are looking at, road user charges. And so another firm is working with KDOT on that. And, every state's looking at it. The federal government's looking at it. I think that's something that is not too far off in our future. About, everyone realizes, we have a push to electric vehicles and the benefits to the environment, but at the same time, that's your source of revenue is the gas tax. So a solution has to be developed, and so the road user charge is being looked at by most states.
So our next question is safety defined as no crashes for CAVs or as a reduced crash rate?
Well, I think you could define safety, there's Vision Zero, which is reducing all safety aspects, pedestrians, motorists, and getting down to zero. So the vast majority, in the 90% of crashes, are said to be caused by humans. And so the theory is that if you take humans out of the equation, machines can think quicker, react quicker. Now, there will be some accidents, and there was an accident, I think it was about 3 years ago now in Arizona, and, that killed a bicyclist, an autonomous car, and everyone, I think they stopped their pilot project in Arizona right away. I don't know if they've picked it back up, but, there's a testing process. We don't want to harm anyone during the testing, but I think everyone can agree that that there's a great benefit to safety with this technology. I think it's the transition is and then I guess sometimes a human can make a decision that might be better than a machine for some other logical reason. But yeah, ultimately, everyone believes that the number one reason for autonomous vehicles is for safety.
So we have one more thing. So the question is, have you all thought of testing these on campuses?
I think there are already some autonomous vehicles on campuses. I think a campus is a great environment. With there's dedicated paths for pedestrians. Why couldn't you create dedicated paths for an autonomous vehicle? And many of them I've seen, can be slow moving vehicles that are, 3 to 5 miles per hour. And so I've been on a testing ground before, and I've had one of these vehicles coming at me, and I step in front of it and it stops. And so, but yes, I think because of the nature of a campus as a closed environment, I think campuses are great. And there are examples around the country of campuses that are testing these vehicles.
Yes, I think Anjali, she just shared a link that which talks about Florida Polytechnic University, who are doing the test on autonomous vehicle on campuses. And yes, so she's also wondering if there are any pilot programs on campuses in Kansas and the cities around the campus.
So if you remember on that map that I showed, there was talk a couple of years ago about Johnson County Community College testing an autonomous vehicle. They were reaching out to KDOT and Mid-America Regional Council. I think they were trying to identify funding. So there was definitely interest a couple of years ago. I'm almost positive it never came to fruition. So I'm not sure where that failed. Maybe somebody on the line does. I'm sure Mike Floberg would have known, but I was excited to hear that. But I think college campuses are, a great testing ground.
Yep, Bob agrees to that. Campuses are a common location for pilots of low-speed shuttle vehicles, for sure. Yes, those are like amazing questions. That's pretty great. Any more?
You can also go to, if you remember, Smart Columbus. Columbus, Ohio was the city that was chosen for the US DOT's Smart City Infrastructure Grant of $50 million. And so if you type in Smart Columbus into the internet, they finished their grant. And so all of their applications are running right now. And so they have an autonomous vehicle that's running as well as some other, traffic light technology and other technologies. So that would be a community resource to look at to get some ideas for your own community.
Yes, I just shared the link about the Columbus, the projects. Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for those wonderful questions. And thank you, Kip, for single-handedly doing the presentation. I wish Mike was here, but then again, we had snow issues, right? So yes, thank you so much. If you guys have any more questions about any funding or more about CAV, I think they can reach out to you, Kip, right? Yes. Yes, and any questions and implementing or thinking about implementing or piloting in your cities, reach out to Kip and Mike. And thank you so much again. We'll post this video, the webinar recording, on our YouTube channel. So feel free to subscribe to it. And we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.